look and the entire journey from India at 75, which is the 75th year of Indian independence, to India at 100. And I must say that who we have here with us today is someone who has been part of this journey as a very key member of the India at 75 movement from India at 60 to 75, and now will share with us some thoughts and his vision for how India can build upon the strong foundation that we have, not only of 75 years of independence, but thousands of years of history, and really see where we can and what kind of a position we can unlock for ourselves over the next 25 years. So thank you, Ajay Piramal, the chairman of the Piramal Group, for joining us here today. He is one of the India's leading industrialists and philanthropists, and it's very rare to have a great combination of both, and he definitely exemplifies that. As chairman of the Piramal Group, he has led his transformation into a $10 billion global business conglomerate with interests in financial services, pharmaceuticals, real estate. And of course, under his leadership, he has built a very strong track record of robust, sustained partnerships with several marquee global investors and partners. And I think one of the things we really see happening for India over the next 25 years is, consolidating our position in the world and really seeing how India becomes the epicenter of global leadership as we move forward. And I think Ajay's diversity and the ability to work across the world with different sets of partners really sets his group apart. He's also a very ardent promoter of social entrepreneurship, as I said, deeply invested in unlocking and further strengthening India's socio-economic potential through the Piramal Foundation, and actively steers the group's involvement in various social impact initiatives. And I must say that I've personally seen his passion and excitement as his foundation has worked, across 27 states, 2 union territories, some of the most backward districts in the country, and impacted over 112 million lives. Of course, that's a number, but there's such a large, effect that flows over from that. The foundation has partnered with Niti Aayog, India's foremost think tank, to work in the 25 most aspirational districts across 7 states in India to not only improve the human development indicators around healthcare and nutrition and education, but also in every other aspect of life for such marginalized sections of society. A person of his nature has won so many awards, and I can read out a whole list of all those, but that is actually true recognition of what he has brought both to this country and, for himself, for the world. So Ajay, thank you so much for joining us here, today, and really, sharing your thoughts as we move over to the next 25 years. So maybe to begin with, when we talk of India's, future, right? What's your dream, right? How do you see India shaping up over the next 25 years as we move along to India at 100?
So good afternoon, Rajan, and thank you very much. I think your introduction was probably saying a lot more than what may perhaps be the truth. But anyway, as I see, I think today is a great time to be in India. I mean, we have seen this India when India was 60, India at 75, and today at 75, we are looking at India at 100, or the Amrit Kal, as the Prime Minister has called this. And frankly, I have never seen as much optimism as I see for India today as going forward into the future. And I'm really, unless we mess it up, I think this is a golden opportunity for India, whether it is in terms of business and industry, whether it is in terms of even our soft power that we can exercise over the world, in the world. I think this is the best time to be in India. I can see the advantages that we have. We are a country which has got the youngest population. The demographic dividend is working in our favor. As more and more youth coming in, we see we see a lot of excitement in them, and we've seen that Indians, not only in India but anywhere else in the world, actually make a very useful contribution to the economies of the world, whether it is in terms of talent and whether it's also peace-loving people by and large. We don't create problems. So overall, it's a good time to be in India. But perhaps what I would like to see in India in the Amrit Kal is to see a much more inclusive development of the country. Today, there are parts of the country, we are a large country and there are several challenges, and there are still parts of the country which do not match the development in the more developed parts of the country. So you spoke about the aspirational districts. So we are now working in the 112 aspirational districts. And if I look at just aspirational districts, which constitute about 15% of the population of the country, this is where, if you look at all the human development indices, they are far behind the rest of the country. And if we can get these even to the average in the development indices, I think our GDP growth could be significantly higher, at least 2 percentage points higher than whatever we are targeting now. So people say the long-term growth rate of India could be 7-8%. You can add a couple of percentage if these are developed. So that is one area. And I'm glad that the government is putting focus on that. And the other area that I would like to also highlight is on the tribal population. Again, 10% of India's population is tribal. And many of us have just forgotten about it. So how do we bring in an inclusive India where these aspirational districts population and tribal healthcare, tribal are brought together? That's where even our foundation has been working in close cooperation with the government and with the state and the local bodies and with industry from both India and abroad. And I guess that once we do this well, I think the country will grow even faster, and it will be a much more sustainable development and more equitable growth.
No, I think great points, Ajay. And it's India is so well positioned, right? Like today, when we see the turbulent times in the world, the uncertainty, we are still amongst the fastest growing countries in the world with a lot of catch up. But absolutely right. We have to take everyone along. And I think both the sections you talked of are so critical. But, when we look at both the growth of private enterprise, based on the way we see capitalistic societies grow, and philanthropy, right, which is also required. I mean, you as a business leader and as a group, beautifully represent both of these aspects. Is there a formula? Would you like to see more Indian business groups, becoming like that? Where do you see the role of private sector enterprise? And maybe, we can also talk about philanthropy a little deeper later on, but how do you see this play out, over the next few years?
So the private sector has a key role to play in the growth of any economy, and more so in India. I mean, as we have moved more, we have seen what the effects of the socialist economy were. And up to 91, till when the liberalization started, you saw what growth rates were and how they have increased further. And I think we still have a way to go towards making it a really budding private, to make it the best destination in the world, or amongst the best destinations to invest in the world. And we've seen that as the economy opens up, as regulations are more and more, rules are relaxed and made more rational, I think you will have a lot of growth taking place. One big advantage that we have as a country, again, is the space and the spread of digitization that has taken place. And this again means that there are less regulations, frankly, in this industry. And the more this takes place, I think you will find that whether it is in the business sector, whether it is in social sector, it makes a difference. So let me give you examples. Let's say with the amount of digitization taking place all over the country, you have so much data on the quality of credit that you can give. And therefore, if you see that in the banks, in the NBFCs and all, today the the bad loans or the non-performing assets today are the least. And where elsewhere in the world you find so many issues, we don't have them today. It's only because so much of data is available, so much of history is available of those people who are borrowing. And this same digitization actually has helped in the social field as well. You saw what happened in COVID, for instance. In COVID, India had perhaps the largest for sure, and perhaps the most successful way of ensuring that the direct benefit transfer, where people who really deserved the money got what they were given from the government, itself was only because of the data that we had and the digital infrastructure that the country has, or the fact that we could feed so many people free food grains for 80 crore people have for 28 months have been given free food grain. It's only because of this data available. So therefore, in some ways, what I'm trying to say is that the economic growth and the social development, which are both important for our country, go hand in hand. And as private enterprise improves and becomes more and more, let's say, prevalent and more successful, it will also have knock-on effects on the social sector as well.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Like both your examples were so strong. And I think with the Indian government now, increasing the public digital stacks, right, which move now from financial services to healthcare and now to agriculture. I think that inclusivity agenda, which you initially talked about, has begun to become real. And with a lot of young people and startups and new ideas, new innovation, I'm sure that's going to also propel our private sector to take on more challenges. But also one thing you spoke, Ajay, in your opening thing on the vision was, while India will grow its private sector, our soft power to the world is very, very important, right? I mean, and I know we define soft power so differently, but when you look at soft power from India, how do you see it? What is that soft power of India that you think can shape the world as we move forward?
I mean, I think this whole philosophy of India, and that is, we talk about now in G20, you talk a lot about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. What does it mean? One world, one family, one earth. Actually, where are we seeing, and one future actually that. So look at what happened during the time of COVID, and India is the best example. Again, it was a time when many countries had actually restricted the flow of vaccinations. They kept it only for themselves, and actually the developed world was involved in that, or whether it was pharmaceuticals. And what did India do? At that time, we gave vaccinations to the most needy countries. We gave drugs to the whole world. So this is the way India showed its soft power, and these things are not going to be easily forgotten. People would, remember this. Similarly, I mean, look at even in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the role that India has played has been quite significant. At one time, there was a fair amount of criticism, let's face it. But I think in balance, people have realized that the role we played, and I hear that many times there are leaders of different countries wanting India to play a more significant role in terms of trying to bring an end to the conflict. So rather than taking extreme positions with one side or the other, we've played a genuinely role which is looking at the greater good of the world. So these are just some examples, I said. Similarly, I mean, when we talk about the Indian way, I mean, yoga, has, let's say, been popularized. Isn't that something which the power of India is? So there are so many such things, I think, in education. When you look at the 21st century, let's say, education, people globally are finding that you need to have in education, that education till now has been really very cognitive things. But you need beyond that. You need like compassion-based learning. even our new education policy talks about it, but that is the essence of all Indian thinking right from the beginning. So these are the things where in every sphere we can add to the superpower, whether it is in education, whether it's in the quality of living, whether it is in terms of, nutrition, mindfulness. I mean, these are all areas where we need to be, we can take our power beyond what is understood.
No, I think taking Indianness to the world is, like the talk of Indianness inside, and what does it mean? Like you so truly, Ajay, represent, at least, in my years of interaction with you, the ideal leader, right? You not only need a clear thinking head and clean working hands, but a warm, caring heart, right? And I think that's leadership, right? You talked of compassion and how that will, be inculcated and imbibed in young people from India. And how do we take that forward? Anyway, a lot of Indian talent is shaping the future of the world. But one of the things you talked about, yeah, was India's role during COVID, and the pharmaceutical sector particularly, right? We still have a lot of dependence, on international inputs and others. As far as the pharma sector is concerned, is definitely a very important industry, and you're so deeply involved in shaping the future of that industry out of India. But to really become self-reliant over the next 20, 25 years, what do you think are the key things we should be doing if we were to look at that one specific sector, so to say?
So if you look at pharmaceuticals as an industry, on one side, one spectrum is the R&D, the new drugs, the research and genuine new drug innovation on one side. And at the other end is the manufacturing of generic products, or products which are off patent and you just make them. As far as manufacturing of off patent generic products are, India is now known to have the lowest cost and perhaps the best quality globally. So that is established. I think there are other parts of the whole chain, the value chain, which is where we need to focus on much more. In R&D, the fact is that in 75 years, there's not been any original drug which has been discovered out of India. And therefore, we have to do much more to do that, to see how we can do drug discovery, which of course means that you need to develop a whole knowledge base, and therefore you need really good universities which can impart that knowledge. You need development laboratories that will do that development. You need a set of regulations which will encourage this to happen. So much more needs to be done, let's say, for the R&D sector. The other thing that India actually lost out was in manufacturing of APIs, or the active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are the building blocks for the final finished product. And here again, I think for many years, actually, India lost out in the manufacturing. You're seeing this in different industries. We had become not competitive. Our size, the scale was, it was not a global scale of manufacturing. So our costs of production were high. There were a lot of other regulations as well. I think we have to open up manufacturing. It's not only in pharmaceuticals, which is a big issue, but in many other industries, I think we've lost that manufacturing capability. Though India has had a long history of manufacturing. I mean, for many, it's more than 150 years of manufacturing, but we lost out somewhere on that. So the socialist, I think, regime also brought in, so many other constraints, whether it was capacities being limited, whether it was the labor inflexibility, and so on. So I think now that's opening up, but much more needs to be done. It will take time. It can't be overnight. But the fact that the COVID has also changed the world. The world wants a diversified supply chain, and India is well positioned for that, because we are a stable country, whether it's in politics, whether it is in governance. We have we have a good system of judiciary. the bureaucracy. It's a free country, so I see that there will be again investments coming in. But it take time, but that's where we have to go.
Yeah, I think, by 2047, we have to, I think there's this vision, maybe even sooner, like how manufacturing actually becomes 25% of our GDP.
Right.
I think all the PLI schemes and the encouraging news you hear about companies like Apple and all using India, as a China plus one, but maybe the 2047 vision should be the world should be talking of an India plus one strategy, and maybe that's how we can, get there. But you're right, I think what we have lost maybe in past years, how can we accelerate that? And I think it'll require a very deep understanding, trust between government and industry, and other stakeholders to really make that happen. Even like what you said, some of the challenges that we have to address, maybe we have to figure out the best way to do that. But it's definitely a big agenda for the India at 100, and something I'm sure you will be very involved with us as we do that. But your one strength that at least we've seen play out is how you have leveraged the Piramal Foundation to really make significant changes on the ground, right? Block by block, district by district, tremendous amount of visible change, right, on the ground. And the challenge remains is how do we align the country and large part of our philanthropic efforts to create outcomes that are visible to larger. We have great pockets of excellence where this happens. So Ajay, really your thoughts on how do we broad-based philanthropy? How do we stimulate more giving? Is there something the diaspora can do more to engage with India, or the business groups here, or individuals? Just your general thoughts around how do we improve philanthropy in India?
So first, let's look at the positive. I think philanthropy in India, actually, if you look at our tradition, has been there all the while. I mean, a lot of people talk about how philanthropy in the US and the contribution that many large families have done in the US. I just want to remind you that more than 150 years ago, the Tatas gave all their whole wealth only for philanthropy, which nobody else in the world has given. Like 99%, I think, of the wealth of the Tata Trust is of the Tatas is in a trust which are for philanthropy. But quite apart from that, I think the 2% CSR which the government asked companies to give of their profits, that's been a big plus. But the problems in India, actually, these have been going on for centuries, some of them. And progress has been made, but like, for instance, at the time of independence in 1947, you'll be surprised, but the average longevity of an Indian was only 32 years. We are more than double today. But still, there are lots of parts, as I said, of India, which are still which need more attention. And this can only happen because the country is large. It can happen on scale only with partnerships. And the partnerships have to be between government, between industry, between local NGOs and hyper-local NGOs. Unless we have this collective together, that's the only way I think that these problems, which have been going on even for the last 75 years, will get sorted out. And I'm seeing this example working actually. So what I say is that if what Piramal Foundation, when it puts 1 rupee, actually the multiplier is 15 times. Because that's what the government, the largest NGO in this country is the government of India, the amount they spend across. But how can we channelize them to make it more effective? So, as I said, 15 times the amount is spent by government and by other agencies with us, because of us. But the way, how do we develop the systems that will make it more effective, whatever money you put? How do you measure output? How do you train the middle management of government to actually produce better results, to be better leaders? I think these are the challenges. And if we all work together, it cannot be solved by the government alone. It cannot be solved by any foundation alone. It has to be a collective. And that's what I think we should do. I've found that in the limited experience we have had, this has made a big difference. And if it can spread all over the country, I think it will have a huge impact.
No, I think, you through this conversation, I've been noticing you're talking about partnership, collaboration. And, I think that's really the secret formula. Probably even India's role in the world needn't necessarily be a superpower, but more a super partner, right? Like we work so well with other countries, to partner with them to shape and change a better world for all, right from Vasudev Kutumbakam, what you're saying. And maybe that could be the generational shift in thought process, over the next, generation or two from India, as we, become more powerful or at least have a larger impact on the world compared to what we have today.
I think, Rajan, you raised a really important point. I think that's so important. How can India can also lead the way in collaboration, as you said.
Yeah. No, and I think it starts from business, it starts from the thought process, and somewhere, like you rightly pointed out, it's been there in the DNA of India as a country, right? We've always looked at holistic rather than, individual kind of development. But, again, really taking that point forward, because you are so strong about believing that we need to have inclusive growth, inclusive development. The socio-economic potential of India is really something that we both need to strengthen and unlock, right? Both for our country, and for the world. And you've got rich experience, both through your private enterprise, right? From, all the areas you're in, financial services, pharma, catering to large audiences, or through your philanthropy. So if we were to put all of this together, how can India Inc., especially when we talk of organizations like CII and others who have built, large nation building visions, using industry as a, to attract other stakeholders and actually be a convening body more than anything else. How can India Inc. really shape the future, the socio-economic parts of India? Any thoughts, as we move forward?
No, I think, again, as far as the economic is concerned, I think, CII, frankly, is really doing a stellar job in actually bringing industry together, bringing thought leaders together, first of all, and also trying to give a balanced picture to the government as to what is needed to be done to improve industry. Because as I said, if business does not improve, business can be a force of good. And I think that's what CII has been doing. And we need to emphasize that even more, that how can business be a force for good? I gave you just this example that every 1 rupee we spend, you're getting 15 times the multiple. And therefore, to that extent, I think the more profitable people, the businesses are, there will be greater contribution in the social development process as well. That's one. Second thing is, I think to make us just all of us be more conscious, as they call it, of capitalism, conscious capitalism is important today, because think of it, the differences today, the world has gone ahead a lot. GDPs have gone ahead, but you can see that the difference between the really rich or the super rich and the poor has only widened. This gap cannot be sustained for a very long time, and you will find that there will be challenges in the future. If we want to have a peaceful and a nice world, I think we will have to share some of this. And that's the responsibility of business and leaders. Business leaders are what other people look up to. And I think so it's our collective responsibility to ensure that we set up some standards. I mean, the leadership shows the way at how they can also do, contribute towards the less privileged.
No, and I think that gap, what you rightly said, is widening. And, today India, we keep reading, houses 1/5 of the world population, right? I mean, it's a massive, responsibility, right? Even if we look at it, we still have a, democratic process by way of which we will see a developing country like India probably in the history of mankind, the largest country democratically elected, which transforms to becoming a developed country. And I think the next 25 years, really, Ajay, is about that journey. And I think the innovation that India is going to have to do to make that real for every citizen is quite a challenge. But I think embedded in all of this is I think education also, something that I know you mentioned earlier. It's so critical. How do we really get this new education policy that we have, the right education for all, and more so in a challenging time. When we talk to some, other global smaller countries and where education literacy levels are high, I just heard one minister from a foreign country saying, we should produce graduates by 12th standard today, because that's how education needs to get compressed. We have generative AI, we have learning, we have, while the world and industry has moved, our teachers in schools are still teaching the seventh grade the same thing that they probably taught 20 years ago, because they haven't moved. Industry has moved, right? How do we bridge that? And so many challenges. But how do you see education particularly, and that role over the next 25 years? Is there some thinking that we should be doing collectively?
In education, because that's one of the areas which our foundation focuses on a big way. I think you're very right that the education has to be, which is geared towards the 21st century. Here, I must say that the new education policy actually talks about that. So how do we equip this world? I mean, you talk about, I have grandchildren now, and they are in the fourth standard and sixth class. And frankly, what they talk, sometimes I'm at a loss to, be able to explain to them. So far ahead they are, they talk about coding and they talk about so many other things. So how do we equip people? How do we equip our teachers? So what we've done is, first of all, if you look at education in India, it is the public sector where the government spends the most money on the education budget. How do we make public schools better schools? The new education policy talks about it, and I think we all need to see that how we can raise the standard, because that is where the big challenge is. We found that, again, leadership, whether it's in business, whether it's in politics in the country, whether it is in school, leadership makes a difference. So how we've been now trying to coach, let's say, headmasters of government schools to how to become better leaders, how to get more out of the teachers, out of the students, and how to be open to new learning. And I must say that the results have been really very, very encouraging for us. So similarly, I think we have to spend one area that I feel is that there are so many people in education in the country, but not enough emphasis is been given on training them to the new way of the world and to really make them better leaders, because actually all of these people are leaders. And therefore, how do you ensure that that happens? We have to focus on. The curriculum has to keep changing. You have to keep an open world. Again, the big advantage of India is just the spread of the mobile phones and communication. The cost of communication in India is so low. And with the spread of 5G, and then even further on, you'll find that both data and video will be available in the most remotest corners of the country, which can be a big tool for education and people equipping. So it's a combination of training, which is the most important, is a combination of really technology and then measuring output. In India, till now, we were only measuring input. Do you need a school? You need three classrooms. You need a toilet. That's important. But now we have to go beyond that to really ensure that outcomes are measured, which is what, again, the new education policy talks about.
No, and I think these outcomes will become so important, as people move to a lifetime of learning, right? I mean, in India, we used to always say you get a career for a lifetime. You got one job and you stayed. And now it's a lifetime of careers because the world is changing so rapidly. And especially young people, right? I mean, we are home, Ajay, to 1 in 10 people in the world is an Indian under the age of 25 today. I mean, not only an Indian, and that's going to, unlock the youth power. Our Prime Minister loves to talk of our Yuva Shakti and Nari Shakti, and I think that's the true power, that will take us to India at 100. You talked about your grandchildren. I think they are the ones who will shape that generation, Gen Zs. And we work so closely, as I said, even in our business group, we've transformed now to really look at Gen Zs and their future, their needs, and how they participate in the new economy, right? I think it's so important. But when you look at young people, right, and there are so many of them in India, and again, what you said, across tier 3, tier 4 cities, and very hard to send a common message. But what's your message to the youth of India? What would you tell them? Your
That's a big thing.
experience.
But well, really, the youth is that the future is in our hands, and we have to just work at it. If we can shape the future, it's really in our hands, and this is the best time to be in India. And when I see the enthusiasm of the young people I meet a lot of people in the tier 3, tier 2, 3, 4 cities, and frankly, that is really inspiring. And if we keep learning, as you said, I agree with you, it's a lifetime of learning. And if you are working hard at it, India will reach in their lifetime a really significant position in the world.
No, I think also women, I think the
Yeah.
Nari Shakti, you have any thoughts around that? How women can contribute more? Because we have the lowest, level of women in the workforce, compared to many other parts of the world. Where do you see that role?
I think it's significant. Again, I'll just give you an example from what our foundation is doing. I mean, we work in, again, smaller towns, tier 3, 4. And we found that women who have never gotten out of the house in very traditional areas like Rajasthan, where there is still a lot of women are not allowed to go out too much, married women, stay at home. We just said that why don't we train them to be just data entry operators? And, we gave them basic learning, which was for like 3 months. And now they are really doing a lot of the data which you need, which they're doing for many companies. So it is so transforming. They've changed the way they look at it. Education is important for women, and then giving them a chance to feel empowered, to feel that I can do something, I can contribute to my household, and I can go out and I'm independent, makes a world of difference. And I tell you, there's huge potential, and our women are ready to do it.
Yeah, I think there's been a big shift, in that, and we're seeing that happen. And I think we have to find ways to accelerate that. Ajay, we can keep talking and we can spend hours together, but we just have about 5 minutes. And I'm going to just take a couple of questions, from some of the people who are, engaged in this discussion today. As I said, the large part of this discussion will be unleashed over the next 25 years in different snippets. Many of the pieces we've talked of will have relevance at different points in India's journey, Amritkal journey. But one question is really, your, one of your key areas is real estate and, affordable housing and that sector. So how do you see that shaping up over the next 25 years?
To make
I know we can spend hours on that.
And 25 years, today with such a dynamic world is very impossible to say. So, but I can just say that if you look at the trend, the secular trend is that as more and more people want to take into housing, as the economic development takes place, the biggest investment and the most important investment any family does is in housing. And therefore, with the growth in the economy, I see that this is a sector which is going to grow. And whether it is, and it's not only you talked about affordable housing, that's another area. And as we see that more and more of the financial sector develops, more loans are available to even the people who till now had no access to loans. I think once that happens, then even further the development will take place. So again, credit is very important for the growth of an economy. And these people, large parts of the country or the population were deprived of credit because you didn't have enough data about them. But now with all the new forms of data, I see that this is also going to grow.
Yeah, and now, with that data, I think you can, give smarter credit to people at a younger age.
Right.
Because then, the propensity, if people start buying homes even 2 years earlier, it just changes the whole, aspect. And as we all know, the US became the largest consumption economy when Visa and MasterCard put $5,000 in people's accounts. But, we've got a conservative spending culture, but the home gives that security. Even though we are talking of the metaverse and so many other things today, where
home is home.
Home is home. Ultimately, the human body will reside, somewhere. But great, no, thanks for that. And the other question is around, the importance of climate change and the environment, because while we talk of the next 25 years and growth, the world has to also do it, sensibly. This is a question. So, what are your thoughts around the importance and what role can India play, in shaping that globally?
I think it's no longer a question whether climate change is happening or not, and to control the the ecology is important or not. It's so obvious. I mean, you can see the heat wave in India today.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's going to have a big impact, whether it is on drought, whether agriculture, whether it's on rain, and so on. So I don't even want to go down that path. I'm assuming that is done. I think India, actually, if I was just looking at some statistics, in terms of capacity for alternative energy, India is the fourth largest in the world. So we have some ways taken leadership. We are also in great ways blessed that because you have sun for so much time of the day. Now, the way how we can store it, and as the time goes by, I can see that the storage and the battery and all that will become much better. So again, the only way to spread more of it is to bring down the cost of delivery of to bring down production and delivery of the power, which, if I look at solar today, is much lower than what it is for the thermal power. So just keep spreading it. The investment does take time. I think government has been encouraging that, and we have to continue on that path and just push it. It is such a big necessity. And again, this is not a necessity only of India. It is the whole world. When you talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I think climate is one thing which is affecting all of us. And if we don't do something, it affects our neighbors and the world as well.
No, such a beautiful thought to bring, this conversation to a conclusion, because I know, your deep spirituality comes out from that, and I think if we all have to unlock that true spirit of humanity and camaraderie and compassion to really shape not only our own existence, but of everyone on planet Earth. And thank you, Ajay. We've had such a range of subjects that we've been able to talk about, your inputs, and always very energizing and very enriching to hear your thoughts and your views on India, something that you're so deeply passionate about and its future. So again, lovely having this conversation, and look forward to continuing to work closely with you as we move towards India at 100 and do our little bit to make that happen. But thank you again for spending this time to share these inputs.
Well, thank you, Rajan, for being so considerate. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.